right now, he said that all his car is filled to the brim with stuff. Like his trunk is barely being held down, and you've got all this stuff in the back seat and in the passenger seat.
It means time to stop and play Magic.
Yeah, well, that's really important instead of taking the drive all the way there. But I respect it. I would do the same thing. And he's off to a nice start here.
Yeah, and we have a combo mirror here. Normally, High Tide's a deck that's pretty weak in combo mirrors because it's one of the slower decks. However, Food Chain is also a slow combo deck. And in this situation, this is some blue combo on blue combo action. Lots of counter spells. And in a counterspell war, High Tide's a pretty powerful deck. And I'd have to think that Chilbert's a bit of a favorite here.
Yeah, I would think just because the Food Chain deck isn't that quick, I would think that Chilbert is probably a favorite in this matchup because Chilbert's deck isn't that fast either, but he's really resilient.
Yeah, getting into a counter war with High Tide is a pretty difficult thing to do.
Yeah. This is a ponder to start things off here with Colin, and assuming he does get to go off and do his thing, that's when you, my friend, get to step in and explain all the theatrics.
Yeah, well, right now Colin's in the dark, which means what his main priorities here right now are finding a High Tide, finding a Time Spiral, and most importantly, finding land drops. As the game develops, he'll start to change what he's looking for based on what he sees his opponent doing.
Grace with a couple of lands over there in his hand. You see, it looks like an Underground Sea. He's got a forest. Now, the thing about the Food Chain deck is the goal here is you cast a Food Chain and you have access to Mist Hollow Griffin. Now, you can manipulate Fate for that card. Manipulate Fate says search your deck for 3 cards and exile them. And then it cantrips. You draw a card as well. So it's a really obscure combo deck, but Joba decided to play that in Los Angeles a couple weeks back to a top 4 finish. It was a lot of fun to watch. We'll see if Grace is able to chain together his combo as he starts off here with Noble Hierarch.
Yeah, right now Grace doing a good job of disguising his deck. Force and Noble Hierarch could represent a lot of things. So Chilbert still in the dark will probably just be generically finding his combo.
Yeah, many moons ago, if Force was a Noble Hierarch would say, okay, you're playing Maverick.
Yeah, I would expect Maverick.
Kind of a shame that deck's no longer with us. I was a big fan of that deck.
Well, they're still punishing Maverick. I think a lot of these strengths of Maverick were kind of taken over by Death and Taxes.
Yeah, I think so too. Also, Maverick had a pretty bad Sneak and Show matchup where Death and Taxes is quite good there.
Right.
So you saw Chilbert resolve his second pounder, play an island past the turn back. Grace is going to untap. He takes a draw. Again, you see some blue cards in his hand. He's got a couple fetch lands. Looks like maybe 2 copies of Brainstorm, but for sure a Forcible there. What he doesn't have is a Food Chain or Mist Hollow Griffin just yet, but he's going to lead off here with a Brainstorm. So 3 cards coming for Tannon.
No fetch land or shuffling effect yet, so this Brainstorm may not realize its full value here. We do see a Verdant Catacombs in Tannon's hand, so on the next turn he'll be able to shuffle away 1 of the cards he puts back up Brainstorm as opposed to the normal 2.
He did find a Food Chain within this Brainstorm, so now he's got to figure out what cards he wants to put back here. Now, the interesting thing here is, does either player know what they're up against? That's the fun part, because these are both named players, but do they know each other, and do they know what each other is playing?
Chilbert's got a bit of a reputation with the deck. Certainly, Island could be High Tide, it could be Omnitel, it could be a clever Sneak and Show player. Once he plays a card like Merchant Scroll, then he's told everybody what he's on.
Yeah, it's immediate. He's just giving away what he's playing. He's going to tap 2 mana right now, so this could just be a Merchant Scroll.
Yeah.
And it looks like
okay,
it is.
That's a declaration, especially since I wouldn't be surprised if he gets High Tide with it.
So Merchant Scroll will resolve. He's going to go get a Turnabout.
All right. Depending on the other cards in his hand, Turnabout sets... What he could be doing with Turnabout here is he could be trying to end-step tap out his opponent. Granted, Grace's counter spells are Force of Will, so that wouldn't particularly work.
Yeah, also with Noble Hierarch in play too, it seems like that'll be a little bit difficult because that can provide a little bit of blue mana. Days can be used off of the Underground Sea as well. So there's a chance that that's exactly what he's trying to set up. But here's the other thing. Chilbert's not really underneath any pressure right now either.
No, and that's where High Tide gets really powerful, is if you give it, it can combo off on turn 4, but if you give it until turn 7 to combo off, the combo is pretty unstoppable. With 6 lands, he'll have all the mana he could want. He probably have 2 or 3 counter spells to back it up.
Mr. Rainforest, the play here for Grace. Again, staring at a Food Chain right now. Does he want to deploy that, or does he want to keep cantripping? He does have Force of Will, along with another one, and then a blue card in Brainstorm, so things get a little interesting here.
So he has 1 Force. He doesn't have enough to double Force here. And I think if you're Chilbert in this matchup, you're the control deck.
Actually, I think there's a chance that Tannon has a Shardless Agent in his hand. And actually, he does. So he actually does have double blue card. It doesn't look like a blue card, obviously, but there are 4 copies of Shardless Agent in this deck, and now, well, he doesn't have it anymore. He's just going to cast it and Cascade.
Sarge's Agent cascading into another Noble Hierarch. So Tannon getting a mana advantage. He can start to use these creatures to put some pressure on Chilbert to combo off. So Chilbert's like the combo deck and the control deck in this matchup, which is kind of a strange place to be.
Here's a Brainstorm on the end step. You don't see Brainstorms on the end step very much unless you're trying to set up to go off the next turn. In most cases.
I would agree. And because of that Charlotte's Agent, Tannon Grace only has one counterspell right now.
We often say 2 ships passing in the night is basically what a combo mirror looks like, especially this one.
All right, so we'll see if he's going to go for the combo. He would have had to have naturally drawn both halves of it. I see 2 Force of Wills in his hand. I'm not sure he has the entire combo set up yet. He's just going to go ahead and pass the turn.
Again, no rush. He's not really under any pressure. I mean, take a look at what Grace can do here. He can attack for 4.
He's at 19. Granted, Grace could draw more counterspells, but Chilbert can probably draw. If they get into a game of who can get more counterspells into their hand, High Tide's pretty well posisioned for that game.
I was going to say, it has to favor Colin, right? If it's
Yeah,
all about,
High Tide's great at getting more
war,
counterspells.
yeah, it's got to favor Colin. I mean, he even has Made Flusterstorms, 3 of them.
Right.
Looks like Grace may go with a Brainstorm here. Maybe, maybe not. And actually cast the Brainstorm here with the Noble Hierarch. So, hit 1, 2, and 3. Looking for a Mist Hollow Griffin. Doesn't find one. Found a Forest and Island and another copy of Food Chain. So he's going to be able to put some of these bad cards back and then sacrifice them away with the Misty Rainforest. But his digging has not been great so far.
Yeah, he does this time. He does get a fetch land with it. I do think going for the combo is going to be difficult for Tannon Grace. It might be through these creatures that he needs to be exerting pressure, which isn't really a natural spot for the deck to be. He does fortunately now have two counter spells up. He has Force of Will. Well, if he gets a blue card, he does. He has a hard cast Force of Will and then a second Force of Will in hand.
You see the copy of Food Chain and an Island there. So here's a Brainstorm here from Chilbert again. So
it's another end-step Brainstorm.
Yeah.
If he has Intuition, well, no, he doesn't play Intuition's main. I was going to say if he has Intuition, then that could be an end-turn shuffle.
Just one to wish for, right?
Just one to wish for. Sometimes they're in the main, sometimes they're in the wish board. Sometimes they're not there at all.
So he's obviously digging for something specific. He's going to slide all those lands across. Going to play a Scalding Tarn here. So he had to shuffle away the top card, which he does know about. Not a perfect Brainstorm, but able to clear some of the garbage.
Yeah, he's end-stepped both the Brainstorms so far, which to me reads that he already has the combo or is close to it. He's just, he's just building a larger counter wall, making sure that he hits land drops. He, like a lot of storm-based combo decks, you want to combo the turn before you die.
Using the life total as a resource.
We do see a High Tide in his hand.
Grace picked up another island for the turn. Don't forget, too, High Tide's symmetrical, so even though he doesn't have two, he can hardcast the Force of Will, the High Tide providing mana will actually allow him to actually hardcast them.
Yeah,
so.
and that's where Turnabout actually comes into play.
Sure.
You can end-step, you sometimes want to end-step Turnabout to your opponent's lands.
I wonder if we're going to see that show up now. Chilbert's going to go down to 10, 4 from the last attack, and then 1 from the fetch land.
Yep, Grace leaving up this double Noble Hierarch. And Chilbert probably has one more turn where he can take beats. I don't think he wants to go to 2 because he may need to engage in a Force of Will war on the turn he goes off. So he's going to want a couple padding of a couple life points. I think he takes one more hit.
Goes down to 6 and then maybe goes for it on that.
And then goes for it at that point.
All right, time to take a draw. Looks like I think he picked up a Candelabra.
Yeah, he picked up Candelabra that turn. We see in his hand High Tide. Looks like 3 Force of Wills. And remember, once you have enough mana with High Tide going, you can hard cast multiple Force of Wills in a turn.
Yeah, really easily. Just going to pass back after playing Candelabra. Grace is going to untap. He'll take a draw here. He's treading very carefully. Draws a copy of Misty Rainforest. Again, has a Food Chain, but nothing to do with it. And then 2 copies of Force of Will. So he's kind of all in on this beatdown plan.
Yeah, I'm interested to see whether or not Chilbert is going to go for the end-step Turnabout or Turnabout for more mana. My guess is that he wants the end-step Turnabout. You don't want to spiral into that much open blue mana.
Well, Not going to cast Turnabout just yet. Maybe he's comfortable going down to 2. It looks like he may have found a cantrip here. Yeah, preordained. That's pretty important, I like to believe. So time to scry 2. See where these cards go. This will be pretty telling.
Yeah, I don't know if he has the spiral yet. I don't see one in his hand. There's a card. There's at least one card I don't know about. So, and I would assume with the way he's been playing that it's Time Spiral. Granted, when you have enough mana off the Turnabout, Candlestick, and High Tides, you don't actually have to spiral.
He kept them both. That's pretty telling.
Players, if you are interested in playing inside of
That leads me to believe that it's going to be next turn.
Yeah, now one thing that Chilbert does, this is he has one Blue Sun Zenith in the main, actually. Which that's not common. Sometimes, I know, he's playing a win con in the main.
The reason I'm laughing is because, he kind of sat up in his chair, and then all the dice came onto the screen. It's like, oh, okay, I guess it's time to get to work now.
So when you have a Blue Sun in the main, you are not as reliant on Time Spiral. The advantage is you're not as reliant on Time Spiral. The disadvantage is that you're playing a Blue Sun Zenith in the main, which is not a particularly strong card.
It's funny. You saw Colin kind of buck up in his chair, rearrange his glasses, ask the judge for dice, and it says, okay, let's go.
All right, 1 High Tide, 2 High Tides. Island's currently tapping for 3. Storm is at 2. Remember, Storm doesn't matter here because if you know enough about Food Chain, you know that they play an Emrakul. So milling him is problematic.
Yep.
So you're going to go for the Blue Sun kill.
Floating mana right now is the middle die for you guys at home. The first die that's right by the candelabra, I guess you could say underneath it, is how many High Tides have been cast. And the spells that have been cast this turn, the answer to that question should actually be 4. Because he preordained 2 High Tides and now a Turnabout.
So he's Turnabouting himself. There was a couple options there. He could have Turnabouted himself. He also could have Turnabouted Tannon to Tannon and then moved through combat to try to get most of Tannon's counter spells. Remember, Tannon with 5 islands in play currently has access to 11 mana, so he can cast both those Force of Wills.
Mm-hmm. So a bunch of mana here.
There's actually 16. 2 of them have resolved.
He's got a spell count. Wants to make sure he knows what he's got. So 5, 10, 11, 12, 13. And then, as you mentioned, all these islands tap for triple blue. There's 2 High Tides.
They all tap for triple blue. And I think Tannon wanted to have the counter war over that Turnabout. I think now that he let Colin untap, there's going to be too many Force of Wills for him to get through. So I think that was probably the best window to start fighting. As it turns out, as soon as Chilbert, Blue Sun Zeniths, I have to assume Grace will start the counter war.
Well, see, it's interesting, right? Because if you haven't played against High Tide very much, and they start going off, it's like, okay, what spell do I counter? I have no clue. Because I'm not familiar with playing against this deck. That's where Chilbert probably gets a huge advantage.
Once you let them make enough mana, most of your cards become irrelevant.
Yeah. And now here's a really, really large Zenith.
Yes.
So that was 16 mana.
So Zenith for 13.
Yep.
And
that's a good spot to fight.
Yep. A hard cast Force of Will from Tannon Grace.
Yeah, it says I have a Force of Will.
Force of Will pitching Force of Will. This is the first one for Chilbert.
It's going to add to the spell count too.
Yeah, so this is why the counterspell you probably wanted, if you were Tannon Grace, I think you wanted to have the counter war over that Turnabout.
Yep. This is exactly what you mentioned too. In that, because these are both slower combo decks, Chilbert can win the counter war like a very high percentage of the time because he has so many counter spells in his deck, 4 Force Will, 3 copies of Flusterstorm, that it is very, because, again, these are slower combo decks, it's very unlikely that Grace is actually going to be able to win the combo war, or excuse me, the counter war.
Yeah, and with only 2 cards left in hand and no more counter spells, Tannon Grace is most likely going to sit here and watch Chilbert win the game.
Yeah, and this Blue Sun's going to be for 13 here.
He's not out of the woods yet. He has 1 more Turnabout in the main that he could find. He does not have enough mana. Well, yes, he's floated 1 mana, so that's exactly enough mana to wish for a Turnabout.
Gotcha. Because, again, those islands do tap for 3 blue, so 3, 6. Plus the 1 mana floating is 7. 7 minus 3 for the wish is 4. Wish for the Turnabout lets him untap all of his lands.
Exactly. So what he wants to find is a Turnabout or a Cunning Wish.
Going to play land for the turn.
Well, he had a land for the turn, so that makes it even easier. Yep. And Merch with another High Tide in hand and a Merchant Scroll in the draw. It's really unlikely that Chilbert's not going to get there.
And he's able to use the last mana floating to actually cast the High Tide without tapping his islands or anything. So you see the High Tide die is going to roll up to 3.
Yeah, so it's now 12 mana available for Chilbert. He also did draw the Turnabout, and this should be off to the races.
And as you did mention too, Brain Freeze probably not at its best in this particular matchup just because of Emrakul, but he can just kill you with a Zenith.
Yeah, you can't Brain Freeze. You have to go for the Zenith win. Most of the time, when you're comboing on 6 lands, the Zenith win is pretty easy to achieve. The Zenith wins are harder on 3 land hands. That's where you have to be really careful with your sequencing.
Time to preordain. Ooh. Okay, so he's going to keep that. Merchant Scroll added to the grip. He's got 3 blue floating. This is a Brainstorm. Storm count's going to tick on up to 11. So hit 1, 2, and 3. Don't forget he has already played his land for the turn, so no more of those. Here's a High Tide. High Tide's going to take up to 4. That means all islands are going to tap for 5.
Yep, islands are tapping for 5. There's 1 mana floating, the possibility of 11 mana for Chilbert. He's going to go ahead and make 11 here. That's going to be turnabout, untapping lands, floating 7. So now he has access to 37 mana.
That's it?
Just 37. It's not, hey, it's not enough. Not yet. That's only targeting your opponent for 34. That's not his whole deck yet.
Yeah, the fact that that is not enough, I don't even know what to say about that.
Well, it's not enough, and also, you probably want like +5 on top of it just so you can have another Force of Will when you Zenith him for the whole deck.
You have to imagine, like, I don't think that Colin has to time spiral this game.
No.
So as a result, you have to imagine it's just going to be like, okay, you know, I don't really, because I think he knows that Tannon is probably out of gas now after the Force of Will fight and just how Tannon has put his hand down and he's just watching the action. So I don't even think he needs to find a Force of Will at this point. Chances are he will find one just because he's going to draw a boatload of cards because he's probably going to Zenith himself again to get a bunch of cards in his deck.
Now.
Yeah.
He scrolled back for that Zenith.
He probably seems like another Candelabra or 2, right?
Yeah, you actually have to find the Candelabras the fair way. Or you can just Zenith for a bunch, find some Candelabras, untap your lands, wish for that other turnabout, untap the Candlesticks, make more mana, play another Merchant Scroll, scroll back for the Zenith that you have shuffled in, find it, kill.
Well, there's your Cunning Wish. Gonna go search here. There's a turnabout.
Just more mana. Remember, he does have 32 mana up. He has cast all his High Tides in the deck this turn.
He's gonna cast Merchant Scroll, no mana floating now. You know, I give you a hard time, but every time I do watch this deck play, I kind of want to play it.
Oh, it's great. I mean, the game's the most fun when it's your turn, and you spend like the vast majority of the game is your turn.
It would be kind of embarrassing to watch me do it, but I kind of want to learn how to do it. Like I would like to see I'd like to see my first game me playing this deck and trying to go off, and it would probably take me like 20 minutes or something to figure out what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, so he got Cunning Wish. What he can Cunning Wish for now, if he wants to, is he can Cunning Wish for a Echoing Truth, and Echoing Truth his own Candlestick to make more mana.
See if he wants to go do that. Please. Jeez, I think he may have pegged it. Jeez. All right, Mr. High Tide.
Oh, it's like I've played this deck sometime or something.
So like goldfishing with this deck's probably got to be fun, right?
I mean, that's how you practice.
Yeah,
You just sit there by yourself at a table for a couple hours and be like, gosh, this is great.
So here's the thing, like when you're doing this and trying to kill someone, the thing that kind of is like, I guess, worrisome to me is you're gonna see a turnabout here after Candlestick, gonna generate a ton of blue mana. The thing that's a little worrisome to me is like the kill doesn't seem like it's the same every time. Am I right about that? Like
I mean,
it
it's
seems like
more
you're
or
going
less
through
the
different
same.
iterations.
You're making a bunch of mana. You just kind of have to figure out what's gonna run out first and try to make it not run out.
Tannon gonna count the number of cards that he has in play.
Yeah.
Help Colin figure out how much he needs to actually Blue Sun Zenith him for.
It's usually around 15 cards in play. Like normally their deck's around 45. Unless their deck has done something strange.
And there's a big time Blue Sun Zenith. Yeah, Tannon says, fine, I'll draw one card at a time. Thank you very much. Colin Chilbert with a big enough one to deck Tannon Grace. And we're gonna move on to the second game. Look at High Tide go.
Yeah, Colin Chilbert. He's playing, I think one of the more like, he's playing a combo-centric High Tide list is I guess how I would describe it. He has more turnabouts in the main. He has the Blue Sun Zenith in the main as well. And his sideboard is very good at making mana.
Yeah, that's true. So, okay. I'm going to go to Tannon's sideboard first because that one's probably going to be the more straightforward of the two. You're going to see 4 Obstinate Baloth, 4 Submerged, 2 Engineered Explosives, 2 Null Rods, a Misdirection, and 2 copies of Grafdigger's Cage. As a High Tide player, what do you see there that really scares you?
Nothing.
Yeah,
Nothing.
Null Rod?
Misdirection, I guess, wins in a Force of Will. It's like another Force of Will.
Null Rod?
I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions of people who play against High Tide is
Okay.
they think, well, Candlestick's like this $250, $300 card. It must be the centerpiece of the deck. You know, you'll see people board an Artifact Hate for you. They'll slam a Pithing Needle turn one and proudly name Candelabra. And it's like, that's not where you want to fight the deck. You know, there's 3 artifacts in Chilbert's deck. There's, I guess, 5 if you count the 2 tops. Like, you're boarding a Null Rod against a 5 artifact deck. You can go off just fine without Candelabras. It may take you a turn longer, but
I mean, it's definitely possible.
yeah, it probably will slow you a turn. It takes away your fast combos if they get rid of your Candelabra. But when I mean fast, it means that your turn 3 combos are likely turn 4s or 5s. And for some decks, that could be the difference between winning and losing, but certainly not for blue-green food chain. As we saw there, Colin Chilbert didn't combo on turn 6, and that's not because he couldn't do it earlier, it's because he chose not to.
Yeah, he didn't need to.
Right.
And, there's even a realistic possibility that he could have taken 1 more hit and gone down to 2 and then gone off. Like he started going off at 6, and the part of the reason he did that is because, as you mentioned, he wanted a little bit of cushioning for Force of Wills if it does come to that. But I think he could have gone down to 2 and then still be able to win the game. But let's take a look over here at Chilbert's sideboard. He's got a bunch of bullets for Wish and then 2 defense grids and 2 surgicals.
Like we said before, it's really just a 4-card sideboard with an extra defense, 2 defense grids, 1 surgical, and 1 wipe away in his board. The rest of it's a Wish board. He can board in the defense grids. I don't think they're entirely necessary in the matchup either. If you know enough about Food Chain, you know that they don't actually play very many counter spells. He has 4 Force of Wills and a Misdirection, and a second Misdirection on the board, and that's it. That's a counter war that Chilbert should feel pretty good about.
I would think so. This just seems like, it seems really hard for Colin to lose.
This seems like a great matchup.
Yeah. They're 2 combo decks. They're of similar speed. Colin has more counter magic, and Tannon's combo seems like it's harder to assemble. I guess that's not technically true.
Well, I guess what he wants to make sure is that he wants to make sure he has enough counter spells so that Tannon doesn't just run out the combo and get there with it. So perhaps you board in the Swan Song, then you can Merchant Scroll for Swan Song, which means you can get it up faster so that you don't get a really quick food chain made against you.
Yeah, that's true.
What Tannon's combo deck has going for it is that it's a lot, it's kind of like Elves where its plan B is really good. It's half committed to a combo, half committed to just making insane value with creatures. The thing is that High Tide could care less about value with creatures. It's all about just, can you win right now? And lots of times Tannon Grace's Food Chain deck needs 2 or 3 turns to actually win.
Yeah. So here's the question. As a High Tide player, I don't think Colin's too scared of this particular matchup. What matchup is he scared of?
I mean, Dredge is, if you watched last week on camera, Dredge is miserable. It's like, your only form of disruption is counter spells, which if you've ever played against Dredge is really not what you want to be doing. So first of all your control elements don't work. Second of all, they're like a turn or probably a turn and a half faster than you. And third, Therapy's insane against you.
Okay.
So that matchup's just the worst. There are some other matchups that I think are negative. Miracles is by no means a good matchup, but I would say the best deck against High Tide would be Dredge.
Can you break out of a counterbalance lock? It
They
seems
play
like it'd be really hard.
wipeaways.
Okay, sure.
They have 2 wipeaways. He has 1 main, 1 board, so that post board against Miracles, you can both wish and scroll for a wipeaway.
Okay.
But I mean, all the Miracles player has to do is put a second counterbalance down, and then that doesn't even work.
Sure. Well, Tannon Grace is going to be on the play here in game number 2. Both these players sitting here at 4-1. Colin Chilbert winning game 1 in rather impressive fashion, as High Tide is aching to do. Taking a very long turn, which I know that you're a big fan of. Long turns.
I mean, that's when Magic's the most fun.
Colin going to take a mulligan.
It's not fun when it's the other guy's turn. Like...
I guess that's true.
Have you played multiplayer? The worst part is when you pass the turn in multiplayer and then you have to wait 10 minutes for your turn.
It's all about you. It's all about Matthias. I want to take the longest turn possible. Okay, here's a question.
Are you telling me you play Magic to watch other people play?
I never said that.
I never said that. Why do you play Magic so that you can watch other people play or so that you can play cards?
I watch other people play Magic for a living.
First of all, you get to play 30 of your own cards in one turn. Playing cards is fun, so you might as well play all of them. Second of all, it's just always your turn. This is just great. This is all the things you like about Magic just taken to the next level.
Is this the deck with like the longest singular turn when it's killing someone? Because like, I don't think Doomsday takes that long.
Nope, Doomsday does not take as long as High Tide.
There's 4 horsemen.
Second Sunrise. 4 Horsemen is actually like not playable with how long its turn is.
Yeah.
Second Sunrise is like pretty miserable in how long it takes to win.
The Egg's turn is actually very, very long. I did forget about that.
Yeah, we watched there's a whole pro tour of that.
It sure was. I was there. The rounds kept going way over time. It was a little annoying.
I would say, and you know, that is also a deck I've played because you know it
shocking.
has all the same things you know and love about High Tide are there in Second Sunrise.
I can't believe that.
You know, one, you have like one card that wins the game and it's something stupid like Pyrite Spellbomb. 2, you get to draw your whole deck when you win and play every card probably multiple times. 3, everything's a cantrip. You know, these decks are just, they're awesome.
Speaking of cantrips, we got a preordain here from Colin. Looks like he's putting them both to the bottom. He is going to draw a mystery card. Pass it back over to Grace, who started with a Noble Hierarch off the basic forest. That is a Verdant Catacombs. Grace is going to go down to 19. His life total does not matter. He's going to search up a tropical island. We'll see if Grace has maybe a food chain to drop down here or something else sweet to do. Again, he can be a little quick because he has mana acceleration.
Well, I think that's what he wants to do in this matchup. Like we saw before, that last game, Tannon and Grace got like a 4 damage clock going and then tried to play defense. That's like really similar to how Delver would play against a High Tide deck. But Tannon just doesn't want to be that guy in this matchup. His deck is not well equipped to play defense against High Tide. And I mean, few decks are able to defend against it. Like Miracles is probably one of the few decks that is legitimately good at playing defense here. So he'd rather just try to win the game. Because of the mono blue deck has no acceleration and really needs 3 or probably 4 lands to go off, like Colin cannot do much to accelerate his kill to be faster than turn 3.
Yeah. Charlotte's Agent, turn over another copy of Noble Hierarch. Looks like a repeat of the last game. Here's a Ponder from Chilbert. So hit 1, a 2, and a 3. We'll see if he's happy in just a moment as he does consult his hand. Again, Grace would like to assemble the combo, but in the meantime, he can just be the aggressor. He'll be attacking for 4 every turn. That's a 5-turn clock at this point. Ponder's going to keep for Chilbert, see if he's got a land to play. He does. It's an island. He kicks it over back to Grace, who will untap. He will take a draw here.
Yeah, it's that similar control hand here. We do see a Force of Will, and my favorite card to pitch to Force of Will, the Mist Hollow Griffin in Tannon and Grace's hand.
A sweet little combo there. Tannon going to start by attacking here for 4. There is your Mist Hollow Griffin. Perfect card from Force Will. Also, a combo piece for this deck. But sometimes, you've got to go beatdowns.
Sometimes it's Phantom Monster.
Yes.
Straight in the Legacy deck, Phantom Monster joins the battlefield.
It's really funny.
It only increases that hardly even increases his clock.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually really funny because watching Joe play this deck in Los Angeles, he would hardcast Mist Hollow Griffin a lot, and it would happen against a lot of bug decks that they can't abrupt decay it. And so he would just beat him down with 3/3s in the air.
I'm wondering about the casting of Mist Hollow Griffin here because right now he's dealing 4 damage a turn, and like thanks to Griffin, now he can deal 5 a turn.
But it's fine with having this in play because it needs to be. It kind of needs to be in play anyway when he draws a food chain. So having 1 in play, I think, is fine. He has a backup 1, so if he attacks for 5 here, plays another 1. See, if he didn't play 1, he'd go from 16 to 11 to 6 to 1 to 0. So if he plays the other 1, then it's a 2-turn clock. Because he'd attack here with both of his creatures, put a. I guess just stack with the Griffin. 2 Exalted Triggers, put you down to 11, play another 1, 2-turn clock. So, because as it stood, it was a 5-turn clock. So it accelerates it, I guess, by 1 turn. Here's an attack here for 5. Chilbert's going to go down to 11. Don't forget, if he does play a fetch land, sack it. Or if there's a forcible battle, that could matter too.
There probably will be. You know, you can't actually go to 1, or you can go to 1 and combo off with High Tide, but considering that almost half your lands are fetch lands and you play a lot of Force of Wills, that you'd want to have a little more of a cushion than that.
I think you prefer not to go to 1.
Yeah, I mean, there's some combo decks where, you know, like Modern Storm, for example, where, going to 1's fine.
Cunning Wish. What are we going to search for?
What is it? Sneak and Show can go to 1. That's fine.
Pretty comfortably. And then go back to 8 from Gristlebrand.
Right. And then back to 1 because you always drawing 7's sweet.
Yeah. Nice, fun, fair deck. What about Chilbert searching for? He's got all those bullets over there. Anything you would search for in particular?
I just want the combo. I want the combo very quickly. Yeah, Path to Negation. He's going to combo this turn, and he has underlined that sentence. I am going to combo next turn.
That is very telling.
Yeah.
If he's going to actually use Cunning Wish to get a free counterspell and Pact to Negation.
Yeah, he's going to combo.
It's either this turn or next turn. We'll see if he's.
I think he has one more turn.
Yeah.
He's setting up to make that turn invincible.
I was gonna say we're gonna see if he sits up in his chair and asks for the dice.
Doesn't need to yet. Not yet.
Soon, very soon.
Why? It's so much better to combo with 5 lands instead of 4.
Oh yeah, I don't think he's gonna combo this turn.
Great.
I think it's gonna be the next turn. He might do a little bit more manipulation this turn or what have you, and he's just gonna pass the turn back.
If he didn't have any cantrips and didn't have a 5th land, he'd probably just go for it this turn. Because, you know, by passing the turn, you're allowing Tannon to brainstorm, and maybe Tannon will improve his holdings more than the high tide player would.
There is your brainstorm. Didn't look like he picked up much of consequence here. It looks like maybe a Deathrite Shaman, which doesn't matter very much. See, here's the thing. This is why this matchup is so difficult for Food Chain. It just doesn't have a lot of great ways to protect itself. And its combo's a little bit slow. Like, even if we were to find Food Chain right now, he doesn't have the necessary tools to actually completely finish going off because he needs a Tide Howl. He needs the Tide Spout Tyrant or the Emerald Pool to actually get the job done.
Right, and what's interesting about the blue-green Food Chain deck is they don't even really have a way to find those cards. They just hope to draw one of them. You know, I feel like a lot of times their combo is actually just make a bunch of 3/3s.
Yeah.
Yep. Look at the sweet combo. I make 3/3s.
We saw Job do that a bunch.
It's not, but when you're playing against fair decks, that's miserable for them.
I agree.
Okay, like decks like Stoneblade are just, you know, they'll be very much stop playing 3/3s.
Make a bunch of what?
Like I can't even swords them. Oh my gosh.
This is an attack for 6 now as the third Noble Hierarch comes down. And you see Grace's hand. He has 1 Force Will to defend himself, but we already know that Chilbert has a copy of Pact Negation, so we'll see if Chilbert's going to cast an end-step Brainstorm. He is. Not the first time we've seen this from him.
If I'm Tannon, I do not feel good about this board.
I have to imagine that I'm
You already know that the one card in your hand doesn't do anything. You just see Tannon look at his face there.
That resolves.
Well, what you want to do if you're Tannon is you'd like to hold up as much blue mana as possible so that if Chilbert, during the course of this combo, has to time spiral, perhaps he will draw you into many Force of Wills.
Yeah. I think that's the best you can do.
Yes.
And that's if he has to time spiral, because we saw in the last game, he didn't have to time spiral.
You prefer to not time spiral if you don't have to.
Scalding Tarn, sacrifice. That's his land for the turn. Assuming he goes off this turn, that is his land. There's an island.
All right, so land number 5. 5's a pretty robust number of lands to go off with. It makes cards like Time Spiral itself very powerful.
So there was a version of this deck that had reset?
Yeah, so that was Solidarity, which that was before Time Spiral itself was unbanned.
Okay.
The whole deck can go. Actually, okay. What's the worst matchup for High Tide? That's the worst matchup because it's the exact same deck, but it goes off at instant speed, which is just like you don't win.
Well, let's start the show. This is a High Tide for Colin Chilbert. You're going to get that die. That's the number of High Tides that have been cast. That's the number of spells that have been cast. He doesn't have any mana floating yet. When he does, that die will go in the middle.
Yep. 1 spell cast this turn. Currently, Island's tapped for 1 additional mana. And yeah, here we go to start the turn. I don't know what pieces are in his hand, but if he's Cunning Wishing for Pact of Negation, that does not bode well for Tannon Grace. It means he does not need very much.
Yeah, you gotta imagine he's dead.
Well, he could have, for example, he could have Cunning Wished for Intuition.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
chose not to.
This is a Merchant Scroll. Time to go digging. That's a turnabout.
And yeah, this is, like I said, it's interesting with different people pilot. It's a different style to play the deck. He's very bullish on the mana right now, and in this matchup, that's probably where he wants to be.
This could be a turnabout here of just untapping the lands just to generate a little bit of mana. It's not a ton, but
every amount of mana is important.
I mean, he's going to tap here for 6. Going to cast Turnabout, untapping his lands. That's spell number 3.
And this is this is where Tannon should be fighting. I mean, it doesn't actually. Tannon shouldn't be fighting at all because he knows he's covered. He knows there's the pact there. He shouldn't be tapping any of his mana. He wants to save all the mana for the post-time spiral counter spell fight.
Well, there's your spiral right there. 6 blue mana floating.
Tannon should not try to counter this. He knows what'll happen. You'd rather have all this mana for when you need it.
Well, he doesn't have a blue card in his hand, so he can just force.
Does he have a blue card in his hand?
He's got the Miss Hologriffin still.
Okay. Okay,
So
he
could force alternate cast.
All that would do is mean that if Colin fizzles, he has to pay for a pact.
Yeah,
Which,
I mean,
sure.
there's that, and there's also the fact that Pact would be, well, I guess he would be shuffling back in either way, so I take that back.
It also it removes a Mist Hollow Griffin from your deck, so your redraw of 7 is slightly better.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's 1 card better. Sure, why not? There we go, Pact. So now that does increase Storm by 2, but as we know, Storm doesn't really matter in this matchup because Tannon Grace plays an Emrakul.
Yeah, it's all about Blue Sun Zenith here. So,
but I will say with Islands tapping for 2, 6 mana floating on top of a 5-land time spiral, Chilbert is not worried at all about running out of mana here.
So both players are going to shuffle all the stuff back in. Of course, you do see the time spiral. It does exile itself.
Now, against a deck with more counter spells, what we could have seen there was we don't have enough mana. I was going to say, if Colin Chilbert had a way to generate just a little more mana, he may have used the turnabout to tap out Tannon Grace and then move through combat. That's like the 1 combat step does matter against a control deck.
Okay. So both players are going to shuffle up here. It's time to draw some cards from Time Spiral. We'll see what they're able to find. Just a moment. We'll shuffle each other's decks here, hoping for the best. Now again, it is improbable that Chilbert does brick, but it is possible.
Absolutely. You know, he does play a lot of counter spells. He has so much mana that he really would have to draw all lands and counter spells here.
You see Grace is going to draw his 7 cards. I'm going to actually take a look at his hand and see if he finds a force. Well, he found one immediately. Also a Brainstorm, too. And a Venser. It's got some defense over there.
Well, what you'd want to do with Venser is, it's possible what you want to do is just bounce a land.
I guess bouncing a big Zenith is probably not going to work all that well.
I mean, if you think it'll resolve.
I don't think it will.
I mean, the problem is that, like, it's questionable whether anything he does resolves.
Candelabra to start here, 5 mana floating, that's spell number 7. Here is a preordained, 4 mana left. Again, spell count doesn't matter a ton here because he has an Emrakul in his deck. This is more for good practice for Chilbert than anything.
Yeah, mana's not the choke right now either for Chilbert. He just needs to find a Merchant Scroll or it's really just like Merchant Scroll he's looking for.
Are more high tides important right now?
They're good. I mean, eventually he will need some high tides if he wants, to generate enough mana here. But like he wants some counter spells to make sure he has Tannon covered. On top of that, I guess it's just mana generation right now. He wants to up the mana generation.
Okay.
Make sure that he still has card draw to keep going.
Well, there's your Merchant Scroll. You asked for it and you got it. 1 blue mana floating after this. What's this one search for, you think?
Depends on his hand. If everything's going according to plan, high tide.
Okay.
But if he's missing a piece, then the piece is missing.
Actually, part of the reason he's keeping track of Storm is because of Flusterstorm.
He does play Flusterstorm.
I just didn't think about that. I was thinking that it was mostly relevant because when you think of Storm, you think of Brain Freeze for this particular deck, but Flusterstorm being able to counter Forces of Wills, actually pretty important.
So we'll see what he goes for. It looks like he's going just for the straight mana regeneration of Turnabout here. That's also fine here.
Yeah. 1 blue floating again. High Tide, there's only been 1 cast this turn, so those islands that are in play for both players, since High Tide is symmetrical, would be tapping for 2 blue.
And Turnabout is pretty good. Turnabout's usually the spell that when you're playing against High Tide, like the spells you want to fight over is either the very first High Tide or while they're comboing off, Turnabout is a pretty good spell to fight over.
Ponder here for Chilbert. He leaves it on top pretty quickly there. Must have found something he liked.
We'll see here.
We'll have 1 blue, 2 blue here.
Yeah, we'll see if he has at least 1 more High Tide to cash out, it looks like.
There that is. So he's got 1 blue floating.
Yeah, Island tapping for more. That greatly increases the value of his Turnabout. Gonna go ahead and tap for all his mana. This is gonna use the Candelabra activation. So that's tapping for 12 more mana, making it 13 in the pool, untapping 5, so 8 will be floating now.
So that's going to untap all the lands.
Yeah, so now he has 8. He has 8 mana floating. or 6 mana floating with the Merchant Scroll, and the potential to make 15 more. So he's at 21. That's not enough to get Tannon to draw his deck yet.
I think he's got a little way to go. And there's the Zenith. This is step 1. This is probably Zenith targeting himself, right? Get deeper into his
First
deck.
Zenith's on yourself.
Yep.
Absolutely. It's just a card draw spell. This is traditionally where you would see players play Meditate.
Yeah.
Would be to scroll for Meditate. However, as you see, once you start having enough mana, I mean, Blue Sun Zenith is a much less efficient card drawer than Meditate. It takes 7 mana to what Meditate does at 3. However, it can go bigger, and bigger is usually more important than efficiency at this point.
And this is a ponder. I was gonna make a joke about bigger in Texas, and I just stopped myself.
Oh, okay.
I stopped myself. For you mostly, I stopped myself. I'm better than that joke. This is a turnabout.
1 mana floating.
Are we gonna fight now? No, not yet.
10.
The big question here is just
Six, is that 16?
yeah. These
Okay, so-
look like 10s.
So 6,
Yeah, they're 10
16
counters.
mana, 18 mana floating.
Zenith. Maybe this is what we
Zenith
fight over.
for 15 for 18, it looks like.
Yeah. I think this is the one Tannon says, all right,
Yeah, I mean,
enough
if
is
you're not
enough.
fighting over this, you're not fighting.
Yeah. I'm going to brainstorm first. So hit 1, 2, 3. See if he finds another permission spell. I think he may have found a misdirection, I think.
Remember, he can hardcast all of these.
Yeah.
Well, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 mana, so he can cast 2 of them.
And he does know how High Tide works and that it's symmetrical. Ooh, he drew the Emrakul. That's... I mean...
Secretly, he could get Brain Freeze now.
Yeah. I think it's rather unlikely that happens, but it would be pretty comical if it did happen. Here's Venser. This is going to start the battle. And I think the Venser is actually a pretty good place to start, simply because it can't be Flusterstormed.
Yeah, at some point in this counter war, Tannon is going to play a spell that can be Flusterstormed, but... Well, actually, if you start on a... It doesn't particularly matter where you start.
Ooh.
I'm gonna...
That just resolves. Wow.
And looks like Chilbert was protecting himself with Flusterstorm there.
Yeah.
And that's huge, but what it does mean is that Chilbert can go ahead and... Spiral. Yep.
All right.
How many more counter spells do you have? Because I'm pretty sure that the one that Tannon fights over here, unless he has another Venser right now, that'd be sick. Well, no, wait, 6 mana floating wouldn't even work.
Yeah, he does have another Fencer, actually, which is
In
pretty
his hand,
sick.
he has another
Yeah.
Venser? Oh, wow,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. 6 mana floating. I mean, Chilbert does still get to do this. The other thing too, because Venser is in play, so one of those is going to die.
Yes, one of them's just already
Yeah.
dead. Doesn't matter which one.
Yeah, and so that goes bye-bye. So now he's just gonna have to cast it again, probably. Yeah, with no mana floating.
No mana, so he can't even have Fluster. So he actually is tapped out here. So that Flusterstorm will not work. I want to say Tannon's got this one. Force-Will pitching Tidespout Tyrant.
Does Chilbert have a Force Will of his own?
He has a Flusterstorm. I'm not sure he has a free counterspell here.
This is going to get countered. I think he's just dead.
I would agree.
Yeah, he just passes the turn back. He still has to pay for Pact, but I don't think it's going to come to that, and he's
Yeah,
going to
we're on
concede the
to
game.
game
Wow,
3.
we're going to go on to game number 3 here. So a big turn there, but the time spiral actually kind of backfired on Colin, because while he had everything covered with Flusterstorm, he did not have creatures covered.
Didn't have 2 Vensers covered there.
Wowee. You see Colin taking a look. How much time do I have left? The answer is just about 6 minutes, Mr. Chilbert. The thing is that it doesn't take a ton of time. I mean, think about how many turns we've played in this match.
Right.
15, maybe?
I mean, that's the thing with the high player is that, I mean, with the rule of 5 extra turns, all you have to do is get to the combo turn within the 5 extra.
Yeah.
And you're set.
That's it.
Which is why high tide games sometimes go really far over time.
Really far is putting it nicely. This is the deck that actually makes it so that legacy rounds run long. To be fair, Colin is like really quick with all his actions. There's just a lot of them. That's all.
Right.
It's completely different when you have someone who is not really proficient playing high tide, but the people who do play it, yourself, who has obviously proven you're proficient with it, Feline Longmore.
Sometimes.
Fair. Feline. She plays it very fast, like faster than Colin.
Yeah, Feline, I think of the people who still play it, she is certainly the one who plays it the fastest
insane.
right now.
I remember watching her go off in Seattle when she was winning the Open there, 2 years ago now. She was playing it like a pace that I've never even seen someone play the deck before. It's crazy. Surprised she didn't actually make it out here this weekend.
Was in Milwaukee last week.
Yep. Doing battle. Got off to a really good start. She started 3-0 before kind of crashing and burning a little bit. I think ended up going 6-3 in the tournament, however. So we're being informed right now by the BOM champion, Julian Knopp, who always does watch our broadcast, which is awesome. He won the BOM with the Bazaar of Moxen, of course, with Elves, letting us know that Colin is admin on MTG The Source. That is, of course, where you go for a lot of legacy knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great website. I've used it. I mean, it's been around for a while, first of all, and I have used it when I was learning how to play Legacy many years ago. So he's a big proponent of that. I know Julian's on there as well. Many other players who have actually played in our Legacy Opens. And we can't forget that he is a Grand Prix top 4 competitor in Indianapolis many moons ago with this deck. So he loves High Tide. I think he might love it more than you. I think he may have done the impossible.
Hard to say. Hard.
I think
he's been playing it for longer. That GP is actually the first GP I'd played High Tide at.
Okay. So why do people go away from the reset version of this deck?
Time Spiral is just a very powerful card, to be completely honest.
Okay.
I think it is enough stronger of a card. Like, I wasn't playing during Solidarity, so that's like I'm not entirely sure, but I know that like the strength of Time Spiral is a lot greater than the strength of just like having to go off with like at instant speed. You can play the deck's a lot better when you can cast things like, you know, Candelabras you've drawn, like ponders in the middle of your combo.
Yeah, the version, Solidarity used to play this card, Reset, and they actually went off on their opponent's turn.
Right.
There was this huge battle, but you could only cast Reset on your opponent's turn, and yeah, there was a huge battle would take place, and it was actually just insanity to watch that all of this stuff would be taking place on your opponent's turn.
Well, especially in the mirror. That would be really fun then, because both decks can go off at instant speed.
Yeah.
So it's like this really. If you ever played like old Extended, the Storm deck, it would be like those mirrors too. Like, I don't know, any deck where both players trying to win with Brain Freeze in a mirror gets really messed up.
Yeah. This is why I oftentimes just stick with creatures. That's more my speed.
Sure. Creature mirrors, woo.
Give you the old beatdowns. Hey,
Which
I have played a Brain Freeze. I have played a Brain Freeze deck
my 3/3
before.
beats your 2/2, exciting.
Actually, my 2/2, it's actually your 3/3. I dare you to block it.
I mean,
That's how I play Magic.
okay. You have a trick, you got me.
I dare you to block. Here's a ponder from Chilbert. So both players kept their 7 pretty quickly here. They're going to have to play pretty fast, as there are going to be about 3 minutes here.
Not too fast,
Not
actually.
crazy, nothing
really,
crazy.
I wouldn't be worried.
Grace did bring in Null Rod. I was wondering if he was going to do that.
Disapprove.
I know you don't like it.
The artifacts don't matter. They kind of matter, but not that much. I mean, it depends. I mean, I guess there's some cards in this deck that are pretty bad in the matchup.
Yep.
Like, Wall of Blossom seems pretty bad for starters.
I mean, there's plenty of cards from the sideboard out.
Yeah.
And I think that, Null Rod's not great in the matchup, but it's good in, it's better,
I
as you
think
said, it's better than Wall of Blossoms.
Manipulate Fate seems pretty weak in this matchup, actually, on Tannon's side.
Well, I think it's just, you have to keep it in because it's part of the combo. I feel like you have to keep it in just because
combo?
of that. Maybe?
Is that reasonable to say that you're going to combo here? I don't even think it's reasonable for Tannon to combo. So that can, no, I don't like Manipulate Fate. That's not what you're doing this game. What you're doing is you're playing like Noble Hierarchs into some dudes and you're beating them up. And you're making him combo on like hopefully earlier than turn 6.
It feels like the worst plan ever.
It's not a good matchup for Food Chain. Like, because if you're going to combo, you better do the entire combo worth, not the, hey, look, I made a bunch of Mist Hollow Griffins part of the combo.
Well, yeah, I mean, the entire combo would just be like doing, like, Food Chaining, playing Mist Hollow Griffins, generating a bunch of mana, and then Tidespout Tyranting their board.
All right, so he does have Manipulate Fate. He's going to go ahead and Manipulate Fate here on Colin's end step.
He's just going to he's going to get the Mist Hollow Griffins out of his deck.
It's like as the high tide player, I'm like, yeah, well, okay, you got him. I'm not worried here.
Yeah, step 1. Does get the cantrip too.
All right. So now he has the Griffin set up, so if he can get a food chain going, well, then he can start making a lot of mana.
I got a High Tide with the Merchant Scroll.
All right, so he has High Tide in hand. Colin's just setting up for a combo here. Draws a turnabout. So he can start with Preordain. It looks like he's a little land light, so he needs to make sure he gets... You don't want him to skip a land drop. Skipping land drop with this deck is the actual worst.
Yeah, it seems like it's brutal.
I mean, it's like time walking yourself.
Even though you only have 18 lands in your deck, I mean, you have so many cantrips, you're going to find your lands. There's another one. Another cantrip, maybe? Yep, there's a Ponder. That's kind of the thing I've always liked about this deck. Is just like the first, 3 or 4 turns of the game, you just cast Ponder, Preordain, Merchant Scroll, and Brainstorm, and then on turn 5, it's like, let's go.
You're just... that's the awesome part. And that's why you play lots of fetch lands, is you're trying to make those cards as powerful as possible.
Gonna leave with Ponder, will Chilbert, draw a card. It's a Candelabra.
Ooh, he's gonna play a spell. Watch out.
Yeah, that's crazy. Pick up here. Will Grace. That's a Forest. This is probably gonna be a Null Rod, so your Candelabra doesn't do anything.
Okay, it's like he played Shatter. Like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it matters a ton, but again, I think it's better than doing nothing. That's all.
It is better than doing nothing. If Colin cares, he can find a way to bounce it.
Yeah, he's got a ton of bounce spells he can wish for.
See, it looks like a Scalding Tarn drawn there for Chilbert.
He's going to play a Misty, so that means you know he has land number 5 in the Tarn. Going to sacrifice the
fetch
Misty.
here. And despite it looks like time is about to be called during Colin's turn. That's fine. It means this will be turn 0. Chilbert is going to plan to combo off on turn 4 of extra turns.
Yeah, that's my assumption too. And he's underneath no pressure, so.
I mean, I think the person who's really under pressure is Grace. I don't see... Tannon Grace is going to have to do the full combo with Emrakul. And actually, that's not enough by itself because Emrakul doesn't win the turn he attacks. He's going to have to do it on turn 1 of extra turns.
Emrakul, well, so he generates infinite mana with Food Chain and Mistalo Griffins.
Right, so he can recast all the Griffins.
Yeah, he can recast all the Griffins,
yeah, okay, so he doesn't need another turn. He can win... He has to do it on turn 3 of extra turns.
So Mistalo Griffin, the Bird Brigade, and Emrakul will actually get it done. Here's a High Tide.
So it looks like Chilbert on turn 0 is going to go ahead and go for this.
Ah, he's already played a land too. He's feeling pretty good.
Absolutely.
See Tannon just put his hands down. All right.
All right. And the old 2-card combo of High Tide. Okay, and I was going to say of High Tide into Time Spiral. He's going to get some extra mana. High Tide, turnabout, untap. If there was a counterspell in Tannon Grace's hand, it would have been used right there.
Yeah, he's got a misdirection right now.
Well, that doesn't do much, unfortunately, for Tannon.
Gonna count some mana. There's a Spiral.
Yep, and there's Time Spiral.
2 mana floating. Actually, a little more than that, 4.
And just 2 cards left in Chilbert's hand.
Pretty bold, just making this move right now. So, yeah, Spiral's going to resolve. Let's shuffle him in.
Well, if Chilbert doesn't have any more cantrips in his hand or lands in his hand, then extra turns doesn't help him as much as it would help Tannon Grace.
Okay.
So might as well go for it here. He does have Spiral with mana floating. Yeah, Spiral with 4 lands and 4 mana untapped, and Island's making 2. It's a pretty good bet that you can go off on that.
You would know better than I.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, sometimes you try to combo off on just 4th land, High Tide, Time Spiral.
And just go from there, and it's definitely possible.
That's possible. That one whiffs sometimes.
Sure. I mean, it's kind of interesting to me just because he's underneath no pressure at all right now, but he's just going to go for it. So, bunch of cards here for each player. For Grace, you're just looking to draw copies of Force of Will. And it looks like he just drew 2. And I think he drew 2 blue cards with it. Yeah, he did. He drew 2 Force of Wills, and then a Manipulate Fate and a Brainstorm. So that's really big for him.
2 Force of Wills, a blue card, and a Brainstorm.
Yeah. So
That's
2 blue cards,
good.
2 blue cards, 2 Force of Wills off the Time Spiral. It's really, really good. It doesn't mean it's game over. It's just really, really good
really
turn.
Strong.
There's a
All right,
Ponder.
so Chilbert, yeah, on the untap we see what looks to be a Force of Will left in his hand.
Gonna shuffle with this Ponder. I'm a little surprised he felt like he had to go for it this turn.
Well, like I said before, it might be that he just, that thing, a lot of times you have the ability, you don't go for it because you can make the combo so much better next turn. But if you can't make the combo better next turn, well, then it's worth it to not go for it. Or maybe if he doesn't have the counter spell for Food Chain, then he wants to go for it.
Sure. Well, Chilbert has a lot of Force Wolves in his hand, so he can keep going pretty comfortably here. Going to go down to 1 blue mana floating. That's spell number 6. Again, only 1 High Tide been cast so far.
Remember, what Chilbert is trying to find here, he's trying to find High Tides. Because the Null Rod is on Candelabras, it's going to be all about High Tides and Turnabouts. So Chilbert's going to need more High Tides for a while.
Yeah, Null Rod greater than sign Candelabra. So the Candelabra is off. He does need to find High Tides, and he just did find one. So he'll be able to add even more blue mana. There is a High Tide.
Yeah, it was just in time.
The last mana.
Just in time for him, because that last mana, so he didn't have to tap one of his lands, so that High Tide netted him an extra mana.
So now High Tides are going to allow Islands to tap for 3 mana, so he's going to add 12 mana to his mana pool. This is a turnabout. He's going to untap his lands.
All right, so it's floating 8 on top. He now has access to 20 blue.
How about a Wish?
And he can Cunning Wish. Well, let's looking at his board, what he can do with the Cunning Wish is that he can go ahead and, he can get Intuition. That will let him tutor for any card. He also could have bounced the Null Rod if he wanted. I think here he's just going to looking for Time Spirals. Yep, this is the last time he can do it, remember, because he still has 3 Spirals left in his deck.
So he's got to go a little bit deeper. Is this where the fight probably happens?
I would assume the fight happens here.
So Intuition lets you search for 3 of any card. Your opponent gives you 1 of them. You search for 3 of the same card. You're going to get whatever you wanted. So he does get a Time Spiral. He has 2 blue mana floating. He's going to tap all of these islands. That's going to generate, again, 12 mana.
So he's up to 14 and down to 8. So he's going to do, it's the same thing he did last time, but he basically all that hullabaloo was to resolve another Time Spiral and to make 4 blue mana.
Yep. It's time to battle. Force of Will. Remove Manipulate Fleet.
So remember, Tannon Grace has 2 Force of Wills. Chilbert has 3 Force of Wills in hand, so Chilbert will get to win this counter war. The problem is he might have to pay 5 blue mana in order to win the counter war.
Chilbert says, how dare you? I'll Force of Will back. Tannon Grace.
Gonna force back.
He says, I'll Force of Will back. Removing my Brainstorm.
Is that last card, it depends whether the last card in Chilbert's hand is blue or not. If it is, I don't think he'll pay for, he is gonna pay for the Force of Will.
He says, I'll Force of Will back. What do you think about that?
But now he's used a bunch of his mana. He's down to 3 mana floating.
You see Grace's hand, he's got fetch lands, so nothing doing.
Yeah, so basically, the first Time Spiral was islands make 1 4 mana floating. Now it's islands make 2 3 mana floating.
Yeah.
We didn't get very far. This time through the deck's going to be a little bit tougher because he can no longer Intuition for Time Spirals. And he has 1 fewer Force of Will in his deck. He did exile a Force of Will that time around. That said, that draw was particularly good for Tannon Grace. He hit 2 Force of Wills when that's really the only counterspell in his deck at this point. So it's reasonable to think that this next time around that Tannon Grace won't be able to Force of Will as many times. However, if Chilbert casts 1 more High Tide, that will turn on a Venser Shaper Savant for Tannon Grace, as he currently still has 1 island untapped.
You beat me to it. And Venser was the game that actually won Grace, was the card that won Grace the last game.
Yeah, well, to be fair, second Venser.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Pretty good there. All right, so 7 cards coming for each of these players. Again, it's by no means this game over, even though Colin's going off, because we kind of saw this in the last game, and it wasn't good enough, so.
This is turn 0 of extra turns.
He picked up a whole bunch of ponders here. I'm not sure that Grace picked up a Force Will this go around. So
Well, that certainly does not bode well for Grace if that's true.
So while Chilbert is doing all this stuff, I know some people are just joining us and asking on Twitter, what the heck is Colin Chilbert doing right now?
He's just making mana. Okay, that's just the short answer.
Yeah,
he's making
that's
mana.
the most general explanation.
Okay, he's using the card High Tide to make his islands tap for progressively more and more mana. He's casting them. Then he's casting, there's these set of cards from, basically from Urza block that let you untap your lands, or spells that let you untap the number of lands that it used to cast the spell. Spells like Time Spiral and Snap. When your lands tap for more than 1 mana, effects like that or like Candelabra of Taunos all actually create more mana. So when your mana's all blue, you use the mana to draw more cards to create more mana until you can eventually build your way up to 51, 52 mana, and then you force your opponent to draw 50 cards.
Now the defense grid that Chilbert casts, he has 2 of those in his sideboard. Why is this important?
Well, he has them in his sideboard. They're good here because during this combo, every time he casts Time Spiral, he unfortunately draws Tannon Grace 7 more cards. And as a blue deck, Tannon can cast any Force of Wills or counter magic he draws here. So Defense Grid will help put a stop to that. As any Venser in Tannon's hand is no longer good, Chilbert cast a third High Tide, now Island's tapped for 4, but Tannon can't cast Venser off that island because he would need 7 mana to do so.
Oh, you still can't cast Force of Will.
Still can cast Force of Will.
Because Force of Will will be free, and then you can pay the necessary mana for Defense Grid.
And he can cast 1 Force of Will.
Yes.
Which I believe Chilbert already has covered with a Force of Will of his own.
Yep. And Grace Ever the Gentleman going to help Chilbert a little bit with the mana floating. He's going to shuffle with the Ponder very, very quickly as Chilbert is looking for something in particular here. But you mentioned that he's just generating a bunch of mana with High Tide. The kill condition here is Blue Sun Zenith. You generate a ton of mana. You can actually Zenith yourself. Let yourself keep going, and then you Zenith them for their entire deck. And part of the rules of Magic are, if you're unable to draw a card, you lose the game immediately.
Yeah, 3 mana floating for Chilbert. He has access to 8 more in those 2 islands. But I don't know if he's found another turnabout yet or another way to make mana. He does not main deck a bounce spell, so he doesn't have a way to get that Null Rod off the board. Sometimes players will main deck a card like Repeal so that they can either repeal a hate card like Null Rod, or if there's not a hate card in play, they can repeal their own Candelabra as another way to make mana.
Yeah. Repeal sounds kind of nice in this deck. Gonna go searching for a turnabout here. Again, High Tides are allowing so blue mana is tapping for islands are tapping for 4. So he's gonna turnabout here.
If you think Repeal's sweet there, you should try ever repealing a flipped Delver. That's like one of the more filthy plays you can do in Legacy.
Jerry would be happy, that's for sure. Jerry Thompson loves Repeal more than anyone I've ever met in my entire life. Here's another Time Spiral.
So this is another Spiral. We have, this is gonna be pretty big. We have 14 mana floating. This is Time Spiral number 3.
Number 3. Grace shows his hand and says, yep, it wasn't a good one. That Time Spiral was not good for me. Let's try again.
He still has that blue mana available.
You're right. A lone island sitting out there. And a Null Rod that's not really doing much. As you mentioned, Null Rod not going to play a huge role. You know, Candelabra is a nice card to be able to have access to, but it's not necessary to go off.
Right. And as you can see here, this is why cards like, I mean, I guess in this matchup, I think Null Rod is fine in Tannon Grace's deck just because it has so many cards that don't do very much. But this is why targeted artifact hate is limited against High Tide. You can see, you know, Colin Chilbert has been somewhat restrained by not being able to use that Candelabra, but not too much.
It's kind of funny taking a look at Tannon's Facebook status a little bit earlier today. He mentioned that he was 3-0. He got off to a really nice start. He said basic lands are overpowered. You're right.
They are, but I mean,
islands are way too good.
Why would you, yeah,
right.
if you could, that's the best part about this mana base is that it's just islands.
Basic lands are much too good, especially in combination with High Tide Tannon. So preordained's going to happen here for Chilbert. See where he's going to put these. These are going to the bottom. He's going to draw a mystery card. Not sure what Grace picked up off of the Time Spiral. You see Chilbert has picked up another copy of of a Time Spiral of his own. This is a Cunning Wish. No mana floating, 10 mana floating. What does he want?
Yeah, so the Cunning Wish here, it's going to be, he has a second copy of Blue Sun Zenith in his board. That's in case he can't Merchant Scroll for it.
Yep.
Remember, he already has wished for a turnabout here, so he can't wish for another turnabout.
Now here is Zenith. See how much this is going to be for. Looks like it might just be 11. Yep.
So drawing 11 cards.
None floating now.
None floating. He's going to find it more High Tides and cast them, if possible. We see a second Candelabra. Now there's a second Candelabra in play. It's worth it to him if he has the spare time to use his last wish. Use his last wish. Yes, he has 3 of them. For something that bounces Null Rod.
That would find an echoing truth, presumably, to get those out of there.
Or, yeah.
Use his last wish. He does have 3 of them.
Yeah.
That's just good deck building right there.
I mean, you can't have a 4th wish in your deck.
Unless you play into the joke right away. It's beautiful. 4 blue.
You know, you used to be able to wish for more wishes. That
do
used to
know
be a
that.
thing.
Yeah.
Now you can't anymore.
I don't like that.
The
I don't like
genie's
that
outlawed
change.
that.
I don't like that change. Very vocal about not liking that change. This is a high tide.
I mean, you can't wish for more wishes. That's
Sure you
just
can.
unfair. Think of,
This is magic. This is magic. You can do whatever you want.
All right, so another high tide cast here for Chilbert. Island's now tapping for 5. He's down to 3 mana for the time being. And here's his third and final wish.
Yes.
And it's gonna be an Echoing Truth.
You think so?
I think so.
Turn on those candelabras.
There's another one in his hand. Yep,
Yeah, there it is.
Echoing Truth. Taps, floating 3 mana. And now he should be, this should work. This should be enough.
Give me...
Yes, Tannon's like, oh, this isn't good.
Give me my candelabra back, please, and thank you.
And remember, once you have 2 candelabras in play, now turnabouts don't untap the lands. Now turnabouts untap the artifacts.
Yes.
And that's when things start getting real bad.
Tannon's looking at a misdirection right now, along with a blue card to alternate cast and then pay for it with defense grid.
I mean, he's got to go for it. Unfortunately, Colin just drew 11 cards.
I'd like to believe that Colin has a Flusterstorm or a copy of Force of Will. So, Candelabra, you're back on. Welcome to the party.
So is this other candelabra, and this turnabout, and now Colin has 100 mana.
Approximately.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Right now it's 4.
There's another
3.
Candelabra down to 3.
Yep, and now it's up to a lot, so he's going to go ahead and make 20, then untap that, it goes down to 19. He's going to turnabout, that goes down to 15, untapping his artifacts. So he has 15 mana, taps for another 20, up to 35. The Candelabra puts it down to 31, untapping 4, 20 more to 51, tapping to 47, untaps. Now he has 67 mana, should be enough for Blue Sun for 64.
This is your first time playing this deck, right?
Yeah, that was just on the fly.
He's going to cast a Merchant Scroll really quickly here.
Just to make sure, he should go ahead. He can go ahead with Merchant Scroll.
Turnabout again. Untap
That
these.
is unnecessary.
Well, we'll just stay
All
for
right, so he's at 65, and he's going to go ahead and go up to 85, down to 81.
We can just stay for
Another
a while.
20 goes up to 101, down to 97 mana.
You.
Blue Sun Zenith, you for, well, at least 60.
Misdirected to you?
94. Do it for 94. No, don't tap out.
How about 100 flat? Yeah. How about
70,
2,000
just a modest
Flusterstorms?
70. So
Yep.
that means he has 21 mana floating over the top, and that will be good enough. Colin Chilbert, 2 games to 1, defeats Tannon Grace, moves to 5-1.
Matthias Hunt could not be happier, my friends. That was turn 1 of extra turns, by the way.
Turn 0.
Oh, excuse me,
Turn
turn 0. Turn 0 of